Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll get started in just a few minutes as we're allowing everyone to join us here tonight. Thank you so much, everyone. Oh, it's so nice to see some familiar names in the participants list. I'm so happy that you could all come. While we're getting ready to get started, everyone can share in the chat where they're calling in from and what they do for work. If you feel like sharing, make sure you put it to everyone rather than just hosts and panelists so that everyone can see your responses. Again, while we're waiting to get started, while we're allowing everyone to join the room here, you can just put in the chat where you're calling in from and what you do for work, and make sure it's set to everyone, not just host and panelists. Hey, Emily, calling in from Los Angeles. Happy to have you here. Oh, we got two people from the UK. Wonderful. Another from the UK. Awesome. UK representing. My name is Lindsay. I'm calling in from Lisbon. I'm actually staying at Outsite Lisbon, the Caisto Sodre location. It's really nice here, despite being a little bit rainy today. Earlier today, we went with the whole crew to a pastel de nata cooking class, which was really fun. That's one of my favorite parts about Outsite is that there's a local community manager that helps organize some really fun things to go do. So that might be going to dinner or, for example, going to a cooking class like I went to today. It was really nice. And I definitely recommend this location, this Outsite location here in Lisbon if you haven't been able to visit it yet. Again, my name is Lindsay. I'm head of community and events at Outsite, and I'm here today with one of our members, Amy, and we're going to talk about monetizing your writing on Substack as a digital nomad. I see we still have some people trickling in, so I'm going to give it a few more minutes, and while we're waiting, I'd love it if everyone could introduce themselves in the chat. Just let us know where you're calling in from and what you do for work. And then a few housekeeping things before we get started. I do have the chat open, but I think it'll be much easier since we're going to have a pretty big group today to use the Q&A box for our Q&A at the end. In the Q&A, you can type any question that comes to your mind during the presentation. Other people can also upvote it, so we'll know which questions are people are the most curious, so we can try to answer those. Because like I said, I think we're gonna have a big group tonight and probably a lot of questions. So using the Q&A box for questions will probably be the easiest, so we can try to get to as many questions as possible. So again, as we're going through the presentation, please feel free, anything you think of, just put it in the Q&A box. If you see something else in the Q&A box, you can upvote it so we know which questions are the ones that we should try to get to. We will save as much time as we can at the end for Q&A, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to everyone's questions, but I'm sure there's a lot of information that people are wondering. I certainly have a lot of questions too. So thanks everyone who's been introducing themselves in the chat. I see we have some people calling in from Canada, San Francisco, Portugal. Yep, I think we might be in the same storm. It's a little bit rainy here today, but despite the rain, I really still am loving Lisbon. So we're about 4 minutes in. I see we've got a good group going, so I'll introduce myself one last time. My name is Lindsay. I am head of community and events for Outsite. Outsite offers beautiful co-living and co-working spaces around the world, as well as community and events just like this one for digital nomads, remote workers, entrepreneurs, creatives, or anyone who's interested in the digital nomad or remote work lifestyle. I'm calling in from one of our biggest locations in Lisbon, Portugal. And it's really nice here. I highly recommend checking this one out. Lisbon is a great spot to do some remote work. And again, I have the Q&A open, so if you think of anything during Amy's presentation, just write it in the Q&A box. We'll save some time for questions at the end and try to get to as many as we can. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy, who will introduce herself, and then we're going to get started talking about monetizing your writing for Substack as a digital nomad.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, everybody. It's so great to be here with y'all. I'm definitely missing Portugal and all the pastel donatas, so very jealous. I'm currently in Phoenix. I just got back from Buenos Aires. The coffee culture there is insane, so I'm missing it. So welcome to Monetizing Your Writing with Substack as a digital nomad. I'm Amy Suto, and I was once a Hollywood writer turned accidental nomad. When the pandemic happened, me and a bunch of friends were just like, we could stay stuck and stranded in our tiny Los Angeles apartments, or we could start to travel the world. And so that's how I started traveling. I stay in a lot of different places all over the world now. I'm a full-time nomad. I've stayed in Outsites. I've stayed in a lot of cool places. And I think that for nomads, there's a really cool opportunity with starting their own newsletters, but I'll get to that in a second. I'm a freelance writer and author. I wrote the book Six Figure Freelance Writer, basically about my journey, about how I got started in freelance writing and starting my own writing career. And I can't drink coffee without taking a picture. It is a curse. You'll see a lot of pictures of coffee that I've drank all over the world in this presentation because I think it's important to romanticize your life. As you can tell, I'm obsessed. So first, we're going to start off with what is Substack. Substack is a paid newsletter and community favoring writers and writing-based content creators. It's kind of like Patreon. Basically, people can sign up to read your Substack and they'll pay monthly for your work. I loved reading this. There was this great piece that was basically kind of calling Substack the new magazine. So for those of you who maybe subscribed to magazines in the past, Substack is a new way to support creators and writers and travel bloggers. And I think that there's a really interesting opportunity for nomads, specifically with Substack, because we're already traveling the world and experiencing so many different things. And so it makes sense to share those thoughts and kind of start your own Substack and get paid to do so. So why Substack? It's part of the recipe of finding financial freedom for your own words and stories. As a writer, this is what I do full time in terms of I write for myself, I write for clients. And I think that even if you're not a full time writer, I think that it is a great way to make a little bit of a side hustle income and maybe even more than that. I know that there are writers that make up to $1 million a year on Substack. Some of those writers are food writers and recipe bloggers and travel bloggers. And so there's a lot of really cool opportunities on Substack to make a living, whether that's something that you're just doing as a hobby or something that you want to monetize. Another great way to, a great reason why you should write your own Substack is that it's a great way to share your adventures as a digital nomad. I think that there's something really special about sharing your travels because we're all in this lifestyle of seeing the world and having these incredible, amazing adventures. And sometimes our friends get sick of hearing it because they've all been to the same places too. And it's great to kind of share with a larger community that wants to plan their own travels. And for example, I just went to Machu Picchu this year and I wrote a little piece about how a 4-day trek changes your life. Because did you actually go on the trek if you haven't written about it? And I also wrote about this piece from the perspective of the fact that a few years ago, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And I was falling downstairs and really in a bad spot. And over the last few years, I've kind of healed my condition and gone into remission and climbed hundreds of stairs of ancient Incan stairs on the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. And it was a really cool, transformative moment for me. It was really full circle to see what I was capable of. And I was able to share that piece with my readers. Another reason why you should start your own Substack is to connect with other nomads. I have met people who read my Substack all over the world, and it's always just kind of a neat way to connect with people who share your own interests, who share similar interests to you, and are like, oh, I've been there, you should go here. Like, I was reading your Substack about this. Like, I would love to go there. Could you give me some tips? It's been really neat to kind of like connect with others in the community and kind of get a sense of like what other people are excited about. So whether you're connecting with people online or in real life, I think Substack is a great idea for nomads. And then lastly, the reason why I think that you should start a Substack is this great quote, we write to taste life twice, in the moment and in retrospect. And I think that as nomads or even just as people, I feel like life can just kind of passes by. And I think it's really important that you keep a record of your experiences and what you're thinking about in your travels. And I think that Substack is a great platform for that. So today I'm going to be sharing how to identify and connect with your ideal readership, how to pick a niche that resonates with your ideal audience, how to implement effective strategies to market your content, and how to play nice with the Substack algorithm. I think Substack is kind of an interesting platform, and I'm focusing on that in this presentation because it was kind of like what the YouTube algorithm was like 10 years ago, where it's brand new. People don't really realize how much of an organic reach you can get on Substack and how much people can kind of find you organically, which can be down the line when these platforms mature, it can be a lot harder to find your audience and gain your audience down the line. And Substack isn't a brand new platform. There are writers like Stephen King on it. So there's a lot of really notable writers, authors, journalists, food writers who are on Substack. So it's not a platform that is so shiny and brand new that you're taking a risk by jumping onto it. Another thing that I really like about Substack is, unlike other social media platforms, you own your entire email list. So you can always at any point download your email list, move to another platform, and kind of start from scratch if you don't like Substack. And that's something that you can't do with Twitter or TikTok or whatever. And so I think that as a writer, this is one of my favorite platforms, and I've tried quite a few. So here's my Substack so far. It's called From the Desk of Amy Suto, Writing Entrepreneurship. I'm going to share with you the numbers of how much I've made so far and my journey so that you can see realistically kind of what it can take to grow your Substack from zero, from the ground level where you aren't a big writer, you don't have a huge following, you're just kind of like starting from the ground zero, and how long it can kind of take to kind of see that initial growth. And it takes some patience. So currently I have 39 paid subscribers, about 1,000 total subscribers. I get about 10,000 views every 30 days. And then I'm currently at $3,380 in annual recurring revenue. I think that the most challenging thing about Substack is that it's not just a linear journey. I have been really lucky to see a lot of growth with my Substack, but I think that the hardest part about being a professional writer of any kind, like when I was working in Hollywood, when I was being a freelance writer, is that you are getting feedback on your work in many different ways. And on Substack, it is both the subscriber count as well as the unsubscriber count. And so you'll see here, you'll see like a little spike of growth, and then you'll see a little dip. And so for me as a writer, it can be super nerve-wracking to be like publishing posts and then be like, okay, this post performed really well. People are super excited. I got several like new subscribers from this. And then you see another post where you're like, oh, I just lost 3 subscribers. What am I doing wrong? So it can be a little bit maddening, but I think that the thing that makes it all worth it is the community that you're growing along the way. So it's not just about the numbers, but I share the numbers because I think it's important to be transparent about how long this journey takes. I'm on month 7 of growing my Substack, and I spend about 2 hours a week on it. And it's something that is a labor of love. It's something that I really enjoy. But from now, I'm going to kind of dive into like how to kind of start your Substack from scratch, because I think that this is something that can feel a little daunting when you're at the beginning of your journey, but it's kind of exciting to see the numbers continue to grow. So when you're starting your Substack, it's super important to start with this idea of what is your niche. And people overcomplicate this idea of having a niche. And I think that you kind of need to just stop and think about, what are you obsessed with? What are you obsessed with? Like for me, I'm obsessed with pictures of coffee. This is from Buenos Aires, Lab Coffee, excellent flat whites, super great if you haven't been. And so when you're thinking about what you're obsessed with and the things that you really love to write about or share, think about like different topics. Like, do you like talking about travel? Do you like talking about entrepreneurship? And then even more specific than that, is there something in that kind of niche that you're really excited about? Do you like talking about long-term travel, or like slow matting, which is kind of spending more like a longer term in like several months in one spot versus like shorter vacation travel? So trying to get a little bit more specific than just travel. The second thing to ask yourself is, what do people ask you about the most? What do you get the most questions about when people are like, okay, your life is really cool. How do you do X, Y, and Z? Or I really liked how you planned that trip. What did you do to kind of put that together? Or you're an amazing cook. What is your recipe? So thinking about what people identify in you as something that they're interested in learning about, or something that they're really excited for you to elaborate on. That is a thing that you want to focus on for your niche, but you also have to make sure that whatever you pick, you can talk about on a weekly basis and not get bored. So my niche on From the Desk of Amy Suto is writing, specifically freelancing, growing on Substack, and writing books, which is what I do for myself and my clients. and then travel, drinking coffee in exotic places, and entrepreneurship, specifically mindset in the entrepreneurship space, AI tools that I use and love, systems and habits and things like that. So that's kind of my niche, but I think it's important to remember that you can change your mind. It's okay to change your niche, just call it a rebrand. And this is something that I did when I was starting my Substack. I was more focused on calling it, it was called, instead of From the Desk of Amy Suto, it was Diary of an Author. And I was specifically talking about books and ghostwriting and kind of more of the literary space, but I felt bored by that. I wanted to talk more about my travels, entrepreneurship, as well as writing. And so I kind of zoomed out my niche a little bit. So just remember, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change your niche. It's okay to experiment. That is kind of part of the success of writing a paid newsletter, is because you're able to get feedback from your audience and also understand what you're enjoying writing about. And that's super important. The rule number one of Substack Club is never miss a week. And I say that because it is so, so, so important to have consistency. The algorithm on Substack loves consistency, to the point where every single week that you are consistent with posting at least once per week, it will send you an email telling you how, like, in what kind of like part of like the subscriber percentage you're in. Like, you're in the top 7% of writers on Substack because you post weekly for 6 months. And so you want to continue to post content on Substack so that the algorithm knows that you're giving your readers content on a regular basis. And this can be really challenging. I remember I was in Athens and I had a horrible fever. I had not had my post planned for the day. I was still not fully doing several posts ahead of time to give myself a buffer. And I remember like writing a post like in bed feverishly and hitting send, and I'm like, I'm not doing that again. So part of consistency is not only building the discipline of the weekly habit, but also making sure that you are scheduling your posts ahead of time, at least a week. The second thing that the algorithm loves is reader recommendations. So Substack is built off of reader recommendations. And so anytime somebody loves one of your Substacks or your Substack publication as a whole, they can recommend it. So if somebody subscribes to their publication, they will be recommended to also subscribe to yours. This is a great way to build community with readers who maybe will have never met you and never have found you, was it not for the reader recommendation. The next thing the algorithm loves is proper categorization of your Substack, meaning you're picking categories that your Substack actually falls under. And so there's a lot of different categories on Substack. And so making sure that you're properly categorized is really important. And sometimes it can be difficult because the categories feel a little bit broad. I picked entrepreneurship and travel because I think that most represents my publication, but you really want to make sure that you're filling out your full profile, that you're being really specific and mindful, because the algorithm is going to basically boost you to those categories and those readers. And if you're not a travel blog and you're not writing about travel and you're categorized as travel, people are going to be like, why is this in my feed? So it's important to make sure that you've got all of your settings filled out correctly on Substack. And then lastly, consistency. I think consistency is super important. And while you can start a Substack and not be consistent, I think it's going to be a lot harder to grow. And I've seen a lot of people struggle if they're not able to hit at least one post a week. And it doesn't have to be a super long post. It just has to be one post a week. And it's okay if those posts are also still a learning exercise for you. If you feel like you're just still kind of like getting in the groove, commit to posting once a week if you really want to do this and if you really want to grow, and you'll see the rewards come from that. I've got currently 48 publications recommending me and 115 subscribers from recommendations. And so it just goes to show that those 115 people wouldn't have found me without those recommendations. So it's super important to not only write content that you think your community will love, but also to think about like what publications you might want to recommend as well. And so trying to kind of understand that it's not a competition on Substack. It's actually, we're all in this together, just trying to help each other out. The next thing that you need to think about is, who are your ideal readers? Where do they hang out? What do they want to learn? And do they want to read long posts or short posts from you? And the best way to understand more deeply about your ideal readers is to talk to them. I love using Substack's subscriber chat feature and their poll feature to be able to kind of understand like what they're wanting from you, I basically created this poll a few times, like early on when I was getting started, being like, okay, what categories do you want posts from me? Do you want more posts about ghostwriting? Do you want more posts about freelance writing? Do you want more posts about travel? And from there, I was able to kind of custom create some posts just for my community based on their feedback. I think it's super important to get to know your community. When you're writing a Substack, you're not just writing a magazine, sending it out into the void. You're also engaging with the community that's leaving comments and that's checking in. I posted a post 2 weeks ago about how it was kind of like a break from my usual content about how I just put my autoimmune condition into remission. And I've kind of always been very vulnerable on the internet and always kind of shared things that I'm like, I think this might be interesting to you guys. This is how I think travel was like a really important kind of piece of my health. And like, I know this isn't what I usually write, but I think I want to share it with you. And after that post, I got a lot of messages from readers who were also dealing with autoimmune conditions, who were also curious about how travel could maybe help them. And we're kind of also curious about my journey and wanted to learn more. And so I think that it's really important to, when you're thinking about your ideal readers, that you don't just put your content in a box and be like, okay, my readers will never want to read about that. To know that like sometimes you might want to try out a topic with them, see if it resonates, see if people are like, oh, this is actually really interesting, I want to hear more about that. Or if it's something that pretty much nobody wants to hear about, you will tell by the fact that your analytics will just kind of like drop a little bit and there'll be a radio silence. And so as a writer on Substack, your feedback from your audience is going to come in analytics. And so it's important to see what performs best and what people are super excited about. And sometimes as a writer, there are going to be posts that I've like maybe spent like a half hour writing and I'm like, I think this is good, but we'll see what people think. And then it's like my most popular post. And then the post that I spent days like kind of like agonizing over gets a little bit more crickets. And so I think it's important to know that you need to get out of your own way and your ideal readers will tell you what they're interested in and you just have to listen to them along the journey. So how can people learn about your Substack and how can you grow your Substack? I think it's really important to repost all of your content as soon as it's live. And by that, I mean when your Substack, like your new post comes out on Substack, making sure you're reposting it to Twitter, to LinkedIn, to Substack Notes, to all of the different social media platforms so that you can get it out to the world and people can find you. It's also important to ask your readers to repost your content, which is something that I need to be doing a little bit more on my end. I see some of the top publications do a really good job of making sure that they ask their readers in every single publication, hey, if you like this, be sure to share. Or, hey, like, here's a journal prompt, like leave a note in the comments telling me what you thought, or like what the journal prompt kind of like evoked for you. So making sure you're engaging with your readers with every post and making them part of the journey and part of the community is really important. And then lastly, one of the things that I did that has really helped me grow was I'm sharing the journey of growing my Substack in public. And it can be a little bit scary to put yourself out there and be like, okay, here's my numbers, here's what I'm doing, here's the content I'm posting about. I think I'm going to do a rebrand. I think that this is more interesting. And to kind of put yourself out there and be like, okay, I'm growing this platform, I'm growing this kind of journey of putting myself out there on the internet. Come along with me. And people were actually really engaged with this. And so I have a whole channel on YouTube that is basically me being like, okay, month one, here's what I learned. Month two, oh, this is like the secret. This is what I'm going to do. Or like month three, I'm feeling a little down. I think I need to change my topics. And so putting yourself out there and building in public is a great way to kind of bring attention to anything that you're building, especially something like a Substack. And then this is an AI tool that I think is really amazing for Substack and for writers specifically. And it helps to allow you to repurpose your content and use it elsewhere. It's called Wondercraft AI, and it's a text-to-speech tool that takes the contents that you're writing and reads it in your voice without you having to record everything. It's super eerie. My own mother couldn't tell that like it was my voice, but through an AI tool. And she's like, "This sounds like you," and I'm like, "It's me, but it's not me." Like I just typed this in and it read it in my voice. And it's actually how I put together my entire audiobook for Six Figure Freelance Writer. And this is a tool that I use to turn every single newsletter that I write into a voiceover for the newsletter. And for my free posts, I also repost them on my podcast. And so this is a super cool tool and just kind of one of the ways that you can use AI tools to help you when it comes to the marketing of your Substack and also the repurposing of your content. So if you write it once, you can repurpose it multiple times to gain more attention to your writing and your storytelling. So just a reminder, repost your content. I repost everything to all the social media platforms, but do not overlook Substack Notes. And Substack Notes is Substack's own kind of Twitter platform. And it's something that they're really wanting to boost attention to. And it's something that you're not going to get penalized for posting links to on your Substack to your Substack. Whereas sometimes if you're posting about your Substack on Twitter or LinkedIn, they'll penalize you if they know it's a Substack link, because technically Substack is their competition. They want you to, as a creator, to monetize on their platforms. And I think that is a little unfair, but just know that the best way to get around that is to post like a picture that is kind of a promotional image of your Substack post that you just created. And then in the comments, put the link to the Substack so that you don't get deprioritized. It is very annoying, but happy to answer any questions about getting around all of that stuff. And then the next thing that I'm going to be moving into at some point with my Substack is using short form video to promote your posts. So anytime that you post a Substack, it's really helpful to summarize what your Substack was about and then share that short form video on other platforms. This is something that I just haven't gone around to yet, but I see other creators doing it super successfully. And so this is just another way to bring eyeballs from around the internet to your posts and help them find your work. And so I've found a lot of my subscribers come from YouTube to Substack, and it's just a matter of trying to figure out, okay, where are your ideal users hanging out? Where should you go? Make sure that you have your content in different places so people can find you. And short form video is still a really great way to kind of get people to you. And another great platform that is very underutilized is Pinterest, where you can post both short form content and photos. So some other tips that really helped me kind of in the beginning of my Substack journey, especially, is that you should monetize your Substack from day one. Even if you have just one post out there in the ether, you'd be really, really shocked how strangers just want to support you. And I think that that's what blew me away, is the generosity of people on Substack to be like, hey, I really like your post. Keep writing. Here's $8 a month. And so I think that as writers and as people with stories to tell, it's really important to put yourself out there and just, be like, hey, if you want to support me, I have free posts, I have paid posts, but would love for you to be on this journey with me. And I think that having offerings for free subscribers is really important. And then having the posts that you put under paywall to be kind of like alluring and have good hooks is also important. But from day one, even if you don't have anything under a paywall yet, you should still monetize your Substack because people want to support you. And I think that that's one of my favorite parts about the platform is the generosity and the community that's already built into the readership there. The other most important thing that I learned in Athens is that you have to stay at least 1 week ahead of your content. There are so many weeks where I either get sick or I am traveling and I am exhausted and I do not want to write anything. And if I was a week ahead on my content, then I had the buffer to take a few days to get back to the content. But it is really important to stay at least 1 week ahead in your content. The thing about newsletters, though, is that I think that they feel freshest and most interesting if you're doing them with some immediacy. I'm always sharing travel stories, where I'm traveling from. I'm always sharing kind of tidbits about what I'm thinking about. And I think that if it feels immediate, my readers respond to it better. Not to say that you can't do evergreen content, but I do think it's important that with newsletters, you're basically you're not writing like a year's worth of content and just scheduling it. You're kind of trying to react to how the world is changing and kind of share your life in real time. So that's my perspective, and that's also my perspective as a reader. I definitely like the publications where the writers feel like that they're talking with me on a daily basis. It's like a journey. I'm watching their life, or I'm reading content from them that it feels fresh and interesting. And then the last tip I have for this slide is to keep a list of topic ideas. There are so many topic ideas that I was just like, oh, that would be a great idea for a Substack post. And then I didn't write it down and it just disappeared to the ether. So make sure to write down all of your topic ideas. And then within your niche, it's helpful to have specific content pillars that set audience expectations. Like I write about travel, entrepreneurship, and those are kind of my content pillars. And you can get even more specific with what your content pillars are, but this should just be a way for you to set expectation with your audience. What are they signing up for? When they're signing up for your publication, what type of posts can they expect from you? What type of content can they expect from you? And I think it's really important to be able to set that expectation. So going in, they know it's going to be for them or not. And so this is something that I think finding clarity with yourself about what you're writing about is important before you can communicate that to other people. And then another really important thing, and I see a lot of publications crash and burn over this, is keeping paid reader perks within a reasonable realm of effort. There are some Substacks that launch and be like, not only are you going to get like the newsletter that I post, but you're also going to get this webinar, and I'm going to do like live, like kind of subscriber hangouts like every Sunday over Zoom, and we're going to do this and this and this. And they promise their subscribers the moon, and then they just realize it's not sustainable. And I think the nice thing about Substack is that it should be about your writing. It should be about the value that you're giving to your subscribers from the stories that you're telling and the writing that you're doing. If you're suddenly adding like all of these other things, it can become unsustainable pretty quickly. And so you want to keep the scope pretty narrow in terms of what you're doing for your paid subscribers. And that could be access to your backlog or your archives. And there's so many kind of different things that you can do and get creative rather than just adding benefit after benefit. Because even though you might get a bunch of subscribers, you might not be able to keep that up, or the time management might just be insane. Substack should be something that is additive to your life, not something that completely takes it over, especially because you want to grow with your subscribers and you want to make sure that they're supporting you and they're on this journey with you. And you're not just kind of like doing everything and turning this into a big full-time job when it may not be that right now. And so even though there are a lot of Substack writers that make a full-time living off of Substack, they kept it small and they grew with the readers that were most excited to read their stuff. So it might be a journey that takes time if you're not Stephen King or somebody with a million Instagram followers. It's a journey that's worth going on with your subscribers and doing in a way that is mindful. At least that's what I've seen for the creators that I like most am aspiring to be like. And then remember, do not compare yourself. It is so easy to, like I said, see these famous authors and these reporters, and they get on Substack and they have all these followers and everyone in the comments. But a lot of people on Substack already have a readership. They already have a social media following. They already are Stephen King. And so you can't compare yourself against these great authors, these reporters, these people with a pre-existing follower readership, kind of existing community. And that's kind of why I've been really vocal online about, okay, this is what it's like to grow your Substack from pretty much zero, and to show that it does take time, but it's a really worthwhile journey. And I just feel like it's so affirming every time somebody subscribes and is like, hey, I love what you're doing. I think that this is really cool and I want to support you. And I think that that is so affirming as a writer, as a traveler, as somebody with stories to tell. And I think it's one of the coolest things that we can do through this platform, and why I think it's just so awesome. So yeah, with that, I'll open up to questions.
Hey, that was really awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. I'm going to give people a second to put any questions that they have in the Q&A box. Also, you have the opportunity to upvote any questions in the Q&A box that people have already put. And then I'm going to go ahead and sort by the most upvotes, and we'll just go from the top and work our way down the questions. I know I have a lot of questions. So people, please feel free to write in the questions, upvote any questions that you want to see answered. And I do see some questions in the chat. I'll try to get to those as well, but we're gonna start with the most upvoted questions in the Q&A. All right, so Amy, are you ready?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so let's see. Liz is asking, how is there's actually, I think, multiple parts to this, so I'll go slowly. How is Substack different from Medium, and how do people have to pay to read what you write? They've read for free before. If people don't pay to read, will you not make any money otherwise?
Yeah, so there's kind of a few different elements of Substack. There's similar elements to Medium in terms of if the free posts are available for anyone to read on the internet, it is something that's indexed on Google. The difference with Substack and Medium, from what I understand, because I don't know Medium super well, is that with Substack, readers are signing up for a monthly subscription with you. So the monthly subscription is what they're paying monthly to read your work. And there are certain posts that you can paywall and certain posts that you can leave for everybody to read. And Substack has a lot of built-in features, such as people can get a free trial for a week to read and see if the publication is something for them. And so there's a lot of kind of cool monetization features on Substack that are really smart and a kind of a cool way to use it. If people are signing up as free subscribers, then they can read any of your publicly available free posts for free. And you can decide if that how much of the archives your free subscribers can read, whether it's only 3 posts, the 3 most recent free posts, or something like that. So everything is customizable in terms of how you want to monetize. And I think what is really important to remember is that an email list is not only important for your paid subscribers, but an email list is also a great way if you sell books or products or offerings, or if you have affiliate links. There's other ways to monetize as well if you want to monetize beyond your paid subscribers. But the whole goal should be to continue to grow your publication so that it can sustain itself just from your readers.
Excellent. And that kind of segues nicely into our next question is how do you decide what to put out into the public versus behind the paywall?
Totally. So for me, I like to put my Sunday posts for free for everybody. And so my Sunday posts are include like a 3 minute like story, something I'm thinking about that week, something that I think will be interesting or useful for my readers, and then it'll be a recap of everything that I posted that week. So things I posted on social media, things I posted on my main website, things like that. So it's kind of like an aggregate as well as it has new content for my readers. And then my Wednesday post is like my in-depth, either kind of like a list post or a kind of like a deep dive. I did a whole post on writers versus AI. So I kind of took a look at all of the data of terms of like what jobs are going to be kind of AI proof and what are not, and kind of went through and debunked some fears. And so I had like a whole like 3,000 word essay, like research piece on that I put behind the paywall. And I kind of like have part of those posts available for free readers to read a little preview so they can kind of get a sense of what the post is. And that kind of helps them decide if they want to subscribe or not.
And are you able to kind of automate that with the paywall, which posts go behind the paywall and which are available? So, or do you individually decide for each post?
Yeah, so there's a little button that you click that is like the paywall button. And if you click it, then it automatically segregates the posts and sends certain ones to your paid subscribers, certain ones to your free subscribers. So it's super easy to use.
Awesome. Emily asks, what are the benefits of using the podcast feature on Substack?
Yeah, so that's a feature I don't have a lot of familiarity with. I have my own podcast on Apple Podcasts. But what I've heard is that if you want to give certain podcast episodes just to paying subscribers, then it's a better way to kind of add more value underneath the paywall. And I think you can also open it up to your free subscribers. But I think that for ease of use, it might be a little bit more difficult for a subscriber to understand how to use your podcast. So I know that as a reader, I haven't really quite figured out how the podcasts work for some of the people I'm subscribed to. And so I think that it's a feature that they're still trying to figure out how to use, but I know that there's some diehard publications with fans that just like love the podcast element, especially because it's a pretty easy way to just include it as a benefit under the paywall.
That's really interesting. And then Caroline asks, do you know of any AI tools that help with taking your newsletter content and turning it into multiple pieces of content for your other channels, or would you just use Chat GPT?
Yeah, I would train a custom GPT for that. So ChatGPT has recently opened up this feature where you can take basically a library of your work and train an AI model on your voice and your tone and how you want different posts to be cut up. And I recently did that, and I think it's really helpful to have not just the basic ChatGPT model, but to have your personal custom ChatGPT trained on your newsletter, your website, any content that you have. So if you're repurposing content, it does it in your voice rather than you having to do a full rewrite path on something that does not sound like you. So I would use ChatGPT's custom GPT feature for that.
Oh, technology is amazing. And we have a question here. What should do you recommend offering paid subscribers?
Um, for offering like for paid subscribers, I think that you can kind of keep it simple and just have your like a weekly paid post. Or I know that some publications, like there's this recipe publication on Substack that makes $1 million a year, and she offers one free recipe a month for the free users. Everything else is paid, and she does about one recipe a week. And so it kind of just depends on what type of Substack you're running in terms of what your perks are, what your cadence is, how often you're posting. I know that some paid perks include like subscriber chats and podcasts and different Q&A kind of things. So it really just depends on what your subscribers want from you and how you can kind of decide what is time consuming and needs to be under a paywall, or what is not very time consuming and can be something for more of a broader audience.
Okay, thank you. And then another question from Emily: how do you get people to recommend your Substack, and how do you get people to know about your Substack in general?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. And I think that for the Substack recommendations, it's something that just happens when people subscribe. They're given the option to recommend your publication. And so if it looks interesting to them, if they have read some parts of your publication and are excited about it, then they can recommend it from there. And so it's something that's kind of just built into the flow of the sign up process, and something that they can also do later. When it comes to just marketing your Substack in general, it's trying to figure out what are all of the other channels that you can post on, and growing kind of like other pieces of like just kind of awareness. Another thing that you can think about is also SEO. All of your posts are going to be ranked on Google. And so if there are certain keywords that you think your ideal readers might be searching on Google, trying to write a few posts specific to those keywords can also be helpful. So there's a few different ways that people can find you. It's just about what are you most excited to do marketing wise. And it's going to spread through word of mouth. It's going to spread through social media. And there's definitely some things that you can do to be more active in the marketing front. And it just kind of depends on how much time you want to spend on your Substack every week, and how like aggressively you want to go out and market it.
Okay, thank you. And then we have a question from Natalie about niches. First, she says, thank you so much for your wonderful content. And she is wondering if you have seen any Substack writers who have had success with multi niches. For instance, Natalie crosses over with quite a few things: health, spirituality, ancestral wisdom, wellness, and movement, or does it work better to be super specific?
Yeah, I think it kind of just depends on, it kind of depends. I've seen writers like Emma Gannon at the Hyphen, where she kind of covers a lot of different topics of when it comes to kind of like writing and creativity. And she also writes about her Substack journey. And I think she makes like 6 figures a year for her Substack, and she kind of touches on a bunch of different things. And then there's very obviously very hyper specific Substacks that are just about one thing, like the recipe blogger I was talking about. I know also like a famous chess master just launched his Substack, and he's all about like his journey about what it's like to be a professional chess player. I think that it just really depends on like what your content stack is. I also follow a bunch of writers that just do personal essays about whatever they're most interested in. And they are also full-time on Substack. So it kind of just depends on like what you think your ideal audience will like in terms of the variety of content, or if they want something super, 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 super consistent. I know that with my readers, if I change my niche, then I will lose some subscribers. And so I do know if I'm completely all over the place with topics, I do see the fall off from that. And so if you're able to, from the get-go, be pretty specific about like 2 or 3 topics that are pretty narrow, then that are all kind of like under the umbrella of one kind of like content pillar, then I think that that's the best way to do it. But you also need to stay consistent and not be bored. And so it is a little bit of a balancing act of trying to make sure that you're not getting bored with your content and there's plenty for you to write about. And your readers also know exactly what to expect and know what your brand is.
And surely there's probably a lot of, room for experimentation, especially when you're starting out. So maybe don't let picking a niche be the thing that stops you from getting started.
Definitely. You can always rebrand.
Yes. And then Nigel is wondering, what do you consider to have been your number one mistake since you've started? It's a good question.
Yeah, I think probably getting too narrow when I launched my Substack, and being too narrow and just being like, I'm just going to write about books and ghostwriting and just going to kind of like just be in the literature space, when there's so much more that I wanted to write about from the jump. And I just picked a niche that was too narrow from the jump, and just felt like kind of like restricted in the topics that I was writing about. And I felt like I wasn't able to kind of share the other stories that I wanted to write about as well. So I think that because I was too restrictive in my niche and too specific in an area that I wasn't going to want to write about every single week, I think that you really have to be able to give yourself enough leeway that what you're writing about every single week is still exciting for you. And I think that understanding that your brand might not be like one topic, it might be everything that makes you who you are and your unique perspective. And so I think that that's kind of the balancing act with niches, is trying to be true to your authentic self and true to the topics that you find the most interesting, but still make sure that people know what to expect generally when they're signing up.
Excellent. And the next question we have is from Anastasia. How did you connect with other writers on Substack?
Yeah, so I email with a lot of my subscribers. They leave comments on my posts or they email me directly. And so that's how I met one of my subscribers in Buenos Aires. And it was super cool. We just happened to be there at the same time. And she saw that I was there. She's like, let's meet up. And it was really neat. And so that's how I meet most of my subscribers in person, is I'll just post on my Substack where a story about where I'm going. And I'll just kind of like naturally happen where I'll meet up with people kind of on the journey. But Substack also throws digital events and in-person events. They do different meetups in different cities. And so there's a lot of ways you can meet other writers in the Substack community that aren't in your community, and that are kind of just in the general ecosystem. So it's kind of a neat group of people. Like, I haven't yet found a social media platform like Substack that just has a lot of really excited and passionate writers to just be there and be writing stuff.
That's very cool. It sounds like a great community. And Jess is wondering, what strategy do you suggest if they already have a personal blog? Should they transfer all their content over or something else?
Yeah, it's up to you how you want your strategy to go moving forward with your personal blog. I still have a personal blog where I post different content on, and my newsletter. And I think that my personal blog is kind of more geared towards like long form travel guides that wouldn't really be formatted right on Substack in terms of the way that I want them to look, as well as post about my freelance writing business and that side of things. And so trying to understand where your topics fit in different places. But if you can consolidate them, and if you don't have a million posts on your blog, then that could be the right way to go. So it just kind of depends on if you're ready to go all in. I would recommend just giving Substack a try for about 6 months to see if it's a platform that you're really enjoying, and to make sure that it's something that's right for you before torture your whole blog and moving everything over.
And I saw in the chat that Mackenzie says that they came to Substack from Tiny Letter, and Substack made it really easy to import all of their content. So that could be something to look into as well.
Definitely.
We have another question about kind of multiple topics and niches. And the question is that if you write about multiple topics, especially while you're starting out, is there any function on Substack that allows you to group them separately? For example, I write on health, travel, and combating loneliness. Would I require 3 separate accounts, or is there a more efficient way to organize the topics?
Yeah, I think keeping them under one Substack would be best. They do have tags on Substack where you can kind of filter things that way. I haven't used the tags before, but I think not being scared of putting multiple categories under one account. I think a good example of this is Henrik Carlson, I believe his name is. He's an author who has written a lot of really cool essays about a number of different topics, and he makes a full-time living with his wife writing on Substack. And I think that he does a good job, as well as so many other writers, on like touching multiple topics under one Substack. And people are coming for his voice and the way that he approaches these topics, and not just the topics themselves. So I think also recognizing that on Substack, people are coming for you and your perspective and the things that you have to say, not just the topics themselves, because they could go to any blog that is like a niche for those topics, but they're coming to Substack and they're subscribing to you because they want to get to know you and your journey. So I think that making sure you're not missing that like personal aspect of it, that I think some of the top writers on Substack do so well, is that they're coming at it from a personal perspective and a personal kind of lens that makes it feel really intimate.
Thank you. And Sage writes in, you mentioned that you should have at least 1 week of content in advance, but can you please let us know how you come up with the content or generate content ideas for publishing your newsletter at least once per week consistently, and how to write these ideas on what you are going to publish in advance?
Totally. So the best way to kind of come up with your content workflow is, before you even start your Substack, just try to come up with like 50 ideas and just be like, just kind of throw things at the wall and just come up with ideas. And if you can't hit 50, then it might not be a big enough niche for you. It might not be something you're as excited about, or it just might be something that you need to like think a little bit longer until you can hit 50. And so I think having just like 50 ideas just off the top of your head of like, oh, I could write about this, I could write about this. 50 is not like a hard and fast number, but I think that having a topic that you could just write endlessly about is super important. And it could be about a topic that is something specific. Like I write a lot about freelancing and entrepreneurship, but I also write about stories that happened to me in my life and my travels as a digital nomad. And so understanding that your stories will also come from your life, if that's something that you include in the types of content that you write about. And that kind of content is super compelling and something that you can't necessarily plan ahead of time. And so coming up with like the evergreen topics ahead of time and having like a base list before you start your Substack will help you stay consistent when you do start it. And so maybe giving yourself like maybe a few weeks just to plan your content out before you start so that you have at least ideas on paper before you start. So you're like, oh, okay, if I can't think of anything this week, if I can't come up with a personal story, then I have this like 50 ideas I can go back to. And then anytime that you're reading someone else's Substack or you're reading something interesting on the internet, writing down ideas that might spark for you. Or I think it's also great and to have reactions to things that are going on in the world, reactions to how silly the Apple Vision Pro looks, reactions to like whatever is kind of topical in the world as it relates to your niche and your perspective. So trying to think about like what are those things that I'm being inspired by just in my daily life, and how can I turn that into a post for my newsletter?
Thank you. And then Lane asks, how do you balance making your content free to build an audience of people who love your work and paid to monetize?
Yeah, I think that really making sure that your weekly workload is not too demanding and that your free posts still give people insight into the kinds of things that you're writing and still gives them value, but isn't the longest thing on the planet. So my Sunday posts can sometimes take me like 20, 30, 35 minutes. And as I said, some of my subscribers love the shorter pieces, and that kind of convinces them to subscribe to become paid subscribers. And so I think that like realizing it doesn't have to be this like gigantic effort to really show like your wares to your free subscribers and just be like, oh, like here's kind of a Sunday post, something I'm thinking about, and some links that you'll find interesting. Keeping it really within a scope that is reasonable, because especially for newsletters, even on Substack where people love reading longer form content, you don't want it to be too long. And so I think in the beginning, it also might be helpful just to write shorter and to try to have shorter pieces of content that is more manageable. And then maybe when you are becoming kind of more comfortable with a writing schedule, having some longer pieces that you make free, or kind of picking certain pieces that were paid to kind of show to your free audience, and they can get a sense of some of your longer form work. So it kind of depends, but you really want to make sure you're not overextending yourself and that you're creating a sustainable routine for yourself as a writer.
Thank you. Favi asks, how do you brainstorm ideas, particularly when you feel like you need to pivot and or follow reader interest?
Yeah, I think that it's really helpful to just kind of like see what else is being written about on the internet and see what other people are writing about in the world, or even just like what your digital nomad friends are talking about, or in your niche, like what is kind of the conversation going. There's this tool called Answer the Public, I believe it's called, where you can kind of see what search engine results people are searching right now and get a sense of like what are the trends, what are people curious about, and using that as like a content generator or an idea can be really helpful as well. So trying to kind of figure out like what is kind of in the air, what are you curious about, and then also making sure that you're giving yourself good inputs. So making sure that you're reading and you're listening to cool podcasts, and you're, as digital nomads, we're often out in the world around really fascinating people. And so really mining our external world to be able to write something really cool for our Substack is always the most important part about being a writer, is making sure that, you are your environment. And so making sure that your environment is feeding you creatively.
Is there any option in Substack to offer posts in multiple languages?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think so, at least not at the moment. I don't think that they have super great international support at the moment because they're still kind of a new-ish company. But I think that that could be a really cool potential subscriber perk to be able to like translate your posts in other languages. But no, I don't think at the moment, I don't think that they offer that.
Okay. How do you balance writing from the desk of Amy Suto with your other Substack where you serialize your novel? Do you treat them as two different Substacks with two different sets of readers?
Yeah, so I have a separate Substack that I am writing a novel week by week ish. Really sticking to a writing schedule over there. That one's less consistent. And so basically, my main focus is on From the Desk of Amy Suto, and then my free time when I write creatively, I have a separate serialized novel Substack for that. So I treat them as separate, but every time I post a new chapter, I also include that in my Sunday roundup of things that I've written that week. So that my readers on my main Substack can kind of see what I'm doing over there. I think that like when it comes to creative work, sometimes it doesn't come on as much on a schedule as I would like it to, but I feel like with my main Substack, it's a lot easier to stay consistent.
Excellent. So we have about 5 more minutes. So everyone, make sure you're upvoting the questions that you want to hear answered. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get all of these in 5 minutes, but we'll see what we can do. So the next question we have is, do you set your own price on Substack? If so, how much is typical?
Yeah, it really depends on the type of some Substack that you're running. You can set your own prices and you can set a tier for monthly, annual, and then also like a higher tier, like premium tier. And so for most Substacks charge about like $8 a month and like $80 a year. So there's a little bit of a discount. And then they'll like have another tier for people who really want to support you where you can just put in whatever. And I've seen other different Substacks, like the recipe blogger who makes $1 million a year. She says that her success came from really starting small and only charging $35 a year for her recipes. And so she went after a different model for her Substack. And so it really just kind of depends on what your strategy is and how you want to grow, because a higher price point might mean you might lose subscribers who don't feel like that they're getting that much value, but a lower price point might be an easier yes. But an easier yes and a lower price point also means that you need to hit a higher level of readership. So it also depends on how big do you think your niche is? How many people do you think you'll need to kind of hit your goals? And do you think that this is something that would benefit? Do you think your ideal audience would be able to pay more or less for your publication? So it's a number of different things when it comes to pricing. And that's always one of the challenging parts of figuring out like how to price your work as a writer.
Yes. And what about images versus no images?
Always images. Yeah, definitely put at least one image at the top. Substack does this cool thing where every time you post a new Substack, it auto generates a social media image for you that you can then kind of customize a little bit, that has like the title of your post and like the subtitle, and like you can do like different formats for different social media platforms. And so you always want to have a good image that you can then generate into social media posts that you can post everywhere.
Excellent, thank you. And then what about pen names? Is it a bad idea or fine to write under a pen name?
I think that it's usually best to just be vulnerable on the internet as yourself. I actually wrote a piece about this on my Substack about the perks of being vulnerable on the internet as yourself. I feel like I've met and connected with more people just by being myself online, and I think that there's nothing to fear about being open and honest about yourself as long as you're doing it authentically and with care. And I think that it's a better way to build your brand and do things that you might want to do in the future. And I think that Substack kind of allows you to build a portfolio if you want to be a freelance writer and write for other people or be a ghostwriter. And so if you build under your own name rather than a pen name, then you're able to kind of claim more authority and ownership, and also do brand deals or do other things if you want to do that as well, if you're kind of growing as a creator and a writer. So I think it's best to do everything under your own name, but if there's any reason that you think that you should do it under a pen name, to maybe if you want more privacy, if you're worried about things, then like I think that there are scenarios in which pen names can be great too.
Yeah, it's always scary to put yourself out there, but sometimes the benefits outweigh the cons. So I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions if Amy can stay with us for a minute or two longer. Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
I'd be happy to.
Awesome. How do you improve the proportion of your paid versus unpaid subscribers?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to writing first of all, great content, especially for paid subscribers to retain those subscribers, but also writing great hooks. So the little preview that the free subscribers get of your paid posts should be really eye-catching, should be really exciting and be like, whoa, wait a minute, like I want to read more about that. So making sure that you're making those paid posts feel really hooky, and then whatever you give them in terms of the excerpt that free subscribers are able to read, really compelling. So I spend most of my time with my paid posts on optimizing that headline and that first section above the paywall. So people are like, okay, I have to read more. And that's something that I think you'll just get better with as time goes on. And it's not something you can do for every post, but it is something that you should spend a good amount of time on to try to increase those conversions.
Thank you. All right, we have 3 more questions, so hopefully we can get them all answered. Nigel wants to know if there's an optimal length for posts.
Yes, so you don't want to exceed the email length limit generally because it won't show up in people's inboxes if you do. So you want to keep the posts like I guess somewhere closer to 800 words. I don't know exactly what the email length limit is because it also includes pictures and other things. But I feel like the best length for a newsletter is somewhere between like 600 to 800 words. But it just depends on your audience and what they want from you, because I've had some in-depth posts that were hitting the top limit that people loved, like writers versus AI, where I broke down, writers versus how AI is taking jobs. And I really went in and did a deep dive for that, and people really appreciated that. But then I had a post really pop off that was a really short post. And I think that people also just liked how succinct and how clear that messaging was, and it really resonated with them. And so it just depends on what what topic you're writing about. But I feel like different posts require different lengths depending on the impact you want them to have.
Does Substack take a cut?
Yes. And so this is something that I think you should always evaluate before jumping onto any platform. I was on ConvertKit before this, and they charged me monthly, which was just very frustrating because I had a lot of issues with ConvertKit before. And with Substack, they do take a cut. I think it's somewhere like 10, 15, 20%, which I think is totally reasonable because they're bringing me a lot of subscribers. They're one of my top discovery channels is through Substack, and they're also handling a lot of the payment stuff, and they have a lot of cool features. So I think it's worth it. But there are other platforms where you can pay a monthly fee instead of giving a cut of your earnings. So it's something to consider, and for you to decide whether or not the discovery on Substack is worth giving them a cut, or if you want to try another platform, maybe without the discovery, but where you can keep more of your earnings.
Thank you so much. And our last question, thank you so much for going a little bit over time with us, Amy. Sage is wondering, does SEO play a role for newsletters published on Substack? And if yes, any tips?
Yes, so they definitely play a role. I don't know how long it takes for a Substack to get indexed, but it does take a good amount of time. I say at least 3 to 6 months for your Substack to get indexed on Google, maybe more if you rebranded your URL and changed everything like I did. But you want to make sure that you're doing a little bit of keyword research using a free tool like Google Ads has a free tool called Keyword Discovery, where you can go on and be like, you can type in like freelance writing and then see the volume of search results for topics under freelance writing and see what people are searching for so that you can make content specific to those keywords that people are searching for the most and get more traffic to your Substack. And so you can set different settings with your SEO on the Substack settings to make sure that it's searchable on Google. And that'll help you get a lot more new readers from Google, so that you can continue to boost your kind of like organic following.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much. I'm feeling really inspired about doing some more writing and maybe launching my own Substack. I hope everyone else found this as interesting and valuable as I did. And I thank you again for your time, Amy. And you can see here on the screen how you can connect with Amy, her website, her Instagram, and also the name of her Substack. So definitely give Amy a follow and check out her writing. And one last time, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Lindsay. I'm head of community and events for Outsite. Outsite offers co-living, co-working spaces, community and events just like this one for digital nomads, remote workers, freelancers, creatives, people interested in that type of lifestyle. You can find us on the internet at outsite.co and on Instagram, outsite.co as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about Outsite. I'm calling in from our beautiful location in Lisbon, and we have about 50 locations all over the world, in the United States, Latin America, Europe, North Africa, and in Asia. And I would love to talk to you more about writing, Outsite, traveling, anything of the sort. So please feel free to reach out to me. And again, please feel free to reach out to Amy if you have any questions or want to follow Amy. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope that you have a great night or day, depending on where you are calling in from. And I hope to see you back here for another event with Outsite again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.